With us right now to start the program is Congressman Sam Graves. Congressman, thanks for being here. Oops, I pulled the wrong thing down there. I'm sorry, I turned your microphone off. It's great to have you here.
Thanks.
And thanks for leaving the harvest to come on in and do the program this morning. Our listeners always enjoy hearing from you, and it's good to get caught up firsthand on things that are happening in Washington and stuff that matters back here at home. One of those things is on the defense side with the 139th.
Yeah, very pleased about that. So one of the biggest issues we've got going on in the military is just replacement of equipment and upgrading of equipment because we're simply using it up and we're not backfilling, we're not doing the modernization. So we had $129 million in the defense reauthorization for upgrades to the C-130s. And about half of that's going to go for new engines and about half for the new propeller modifications. But the 139th is going to get some of that. They're one of the first on the list to get the upgrades. So very pleased about that. Being able to be a part of that conference and being able to fight for things like that, being in the room, making sure that, our 139th is taken care of and the C-130 is here and for as far into the future as we can see is, it's very satisfying, obviously.
It's always a matter of trying to make it stick, make them stick here in this area so that they don't move them off someplace else.
That's right. And the good news is the 139th and then the Advanced Airlift Tactics Training Center, which teaches tactics to all the C-17 and C-130 crews throughout the world, for that matter. They do such a great job, and they've proven themselves. That always helps when it comes to, the upper echelon of the military taking a look at bases and units. So that always helps. And then being able to be on armed services, to be right there when we're dealing with the issues that affect, whether it's their readiness or their ability to do the job that they do, and taking care of, all the folks that work out there at the base. It's a good partnership, but the simple fact that they do such a good job, that helps as well.
It's still a dangerous world, and we need to have elements of all the elements of the military up and strong and ready to go. Do you think that we've I'm not talking about the 139th now in particular, but have we sort of dropped the ball a little bit on military support spending?
Yeah, and that's, it's a whipsaw. If you take a look at past administrations, and as we move from one administration to the next, and particularly when it changes parties, you see that whipsaw. And, the fact of the matter is the last administration, they weren't nearly as interested in our ability to be able to project ourselves worldwide and protect this country. And, and the attitude is I would rather, fight the terrorists and our enemies abroad and not here in our backyard, and that's the same attitude that the military takes as well, and most people for that matter. And the unfortunate part is when we don't pay attention to that, we suffer, and the folks that try to do the job are suffering. The fact of the matter is the number one thing we're charged with in the Constitution as a federal government is national security or protection, national defense, taking care of our country and making sure that it is safe. And there's a lot of people out there that are doing everything they can to hurt Americans, and and they want to hurt Americans, and so we have to do everything we can then to protect that. And now we obviously have a president that's interested in that and wants to make sure we have a strong military and we get the funding to them, that they need to do that job.
Speaking of danger from abroad and the response of the president, President Trump seems to have taken on North Korea in a way that we haven't seen from any other U.S. president.
Absolutely, and you have to. My belief is you have to be strong. It's just like the way Reagan brought down the Soviet Union. You have to stay strong, and you have to, not back down. And we have an individual over there that he's conducting nuclear tests. At the same time, he is firing missiles over Japan, and he is pushing it. He's making threats, and he's pushing it, and he's going to continue to push it. And soon he is going to have the capability to be able to reach, the west coast of the United States. If not, Hawaii, obviously, before then, or our territories like Guam before then. And he's making those threats. And if he wants to continue to make those threats, then he's going to have to be dealt with. How that happens has yet to be seen. Obviously, the president is working very hard with China to get them to weigh in on the process. They do not want a problem any more than anybody else does. But this guy wants attention. He's like a child. He wants attention, and so he's going to do whatever he can to get that attention. And be careful what you ask for, because you may just get it.
Well, one of the things he got within the past week was designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. So he's back on that list. Yep,
he's back on the list, and it's absolutely correct. And so, it's up to him, really. To be quite honest with you, it's up to him. And if he wants to continue to push this and continue to make threats and to execute those threats, then he's going to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm. How worried should we be about North Korea?
Well, obviously when you have an instability or an unstable individual in a position like he's in, it is something to worry about. The South Koreans have more to worry than anybody, because simply because of their proximity and the threats that he has made. But anytime you have unrest in the world, you have to worry about it, and hopefully there's going to be a peaceful resolution to this, and it'll go away. But we have to do what we have to do if we get to that point. But it's something that keeps you up at night. Something that I worry about, and it isn't just North Korea. It's other areas of the world. It's a dangerous world, and and we have to be vigilant. We have to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, the attempts to sort of appease North Korea over the last many years and even decades didn't seem to get anywhere, and so President Trump is trying something different.
He is trying something different, and he's being tough, and I applaud that. I think he's doing the right thing, and I support him.
Let's talk a little bit about tax reform. This is a major thing. Both houses of Congress have put forth plans. The House of Representatives has passed a plan. How do you, when you look at the two plans, first of all, let's just talk about how important is it to get tax reform done?
Well, I think it's very important. We haven't had tax reform since 1986, and while it isn't the flat tax or the fair tax, which I am very much in favor of, it goes a long way towards reforming our tax code, being able to do it on a postcard rather than what we have now, which is just a horrendous tax code. That's the biggest thing, is the reform part. That's the most important part of this in moving forward, and I think that's very important. I think we need to simplify the tax code. It's far too complicated and too hard to be able to figure out. And even within the IRS, you get an answer from one person today, and you call tomorrow and get somebody else, and you get a completely different answer. They don't even completely understand it sometimes, and so that's the reason for the simplicity and the reform component to this. But there is two very different bills. We're at step 5 in a 10-step process. Now we've got to go to conference. We've got to work out the differences. It's still going to have to go back to both chambers to be passed, assuming we work out those differences. But there's still a lot of change left to happen. The bill is still very much alive, and will be changing and as we move and obviously negotiate out those differences between the House and the Senate.
Do you think are there parts of the Senate bill that you like better than the House bill, or?
Well, there's some things that they did differently, obviously, and that we did. And there's things about the House bill that I don't like. There are components of every single bill out there that you don't necessarily like. And you take like the student loan interest deduction. That is something that the Senate doesn't have in their bill. The House has. The House eliminates it in their bill, and I would venture to say that that's going to be fixed. That's one of those things that will be fixed in conference. It's and you look at these things and you wonder, how did that get in there? Who placed that in there in committee, and obviously came through committee. And what were they thinking? Because that doesn't make any sense, to be quite honest with you. And there are other things like that, but it'll, that's something that'll be fixed in conference. One of the things that I love about the bills is the elimination of the death tax. I'm a very strong believer in the fact that death should not be a taxable event. The idea that the government is owed anything because you pass away and you have to transfer, that farm or small business or whatever that you've been paying taxes on your entire life is just ridiculous. That's going to do as much to help folks in North Missouri and with farmers and small businesses than anything else when it comes to transferring that to families, so that now families are not going to have to sell that small business or sell part of the farm to be able to pay the inheritance tax to the government. That's a very, very good thing, and that's something that obviously will stay in conference.
Both bills also reduce the corporate tax rate to 20%, which seems to be kind of a linchpin for this whole thing.
And that's important too. One of the things we see a lot of businesses move out of this country, and it's due to I like to say the 3 L's. It's litigation. The three things, it's litigation, taxation, and regulation. So what we're trying to do is eliminate a lot of that regulation that businesses have to deal with, that they can go abroad and they don't have to worry about. And taxation, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And, reducing that corporate tax rate is going to do more to bring jobs back to this country, to keep jobs in this country, to allow more investment in those jobs than anything else. And the fact of the matter is, the consumers pay that. That ends up being passed on. And I think this is one of the best provisions, is to lower that corporate tax rate and allow those jobs to stay right here. So attacking, we still got a long ways to go when it comes to litigation and the fact that it's so easy to sue in this country, but we're obviously dealing with the regulation side of it and the taxation side of it, and that's going to go a long way.
Mm-hmm. One of the more controversial elements of the package, at least on the Senate side, is the state and local tax deduction, which has the high tax states all up in arms, and low tax states or lower tax states like Missouri are tired of subsidizing taxpayers in high tax states. What about that? How do you think that's going to end up?
Well, that's a good question, and that's that's going to be a pretty much a big hot debating point when it comes to the conference committee. And you're exactly right. You take states, and they got themselves into this problem. They're an extraordinarily high tax state, and maybe they ought to be looking at lowering some of those taxes themselves to help their citizens out. And you're exactly right. You take states that either have no, or they do it different ways, whether it's property tax or income tax, that are very low. You take a state like Missouri, we are subsidizing those big states, the states like, New York and California. And it's something that we are tired of. And in states like Missouri, it's not going to affect very much. You still have up to $10,000. If you pay less than $10,000 in local tax, you're going to be able to deduct that. But you're right. In states like and New York's probably the one fighting it the most. They have a horrendous tax on their citizens there in New York, and they're obviously upset about it. But it's hard to tell how that's going to end up. It's hard to tell how it's going to play out, but it'll be obviously a very debated component. It's
interesting that the high tax states are watching this, because there's a bill pending in New Jersey right now in the New Jersey Senate, the state Senate, that would raise the upper income tax level in New Jersey by about 2 percentage points. And that would have been a slam dunk in the past. Now the state Senate in New Jersey is holding off, saying, wait a minute, we might not have that deduction anymore. We better back off and just wait and see what happens. So it's already having a good effect.
Yeah, and that is a good effect, obviously, and they need to pay attention to that. because it's it's going to have a big impact on their citizens, and it'll be like I say, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as we move forward.
Pretty aggressive timetable to try to get this done by the end of the year. Do you think they can do it?
Yeah, it's doable. Obviously the conference will start as soon as we get back from Thanksgiving and start working on it, and that gives us a little bit of time. Obviously, the president wants it done before Christmas, but I think it's very doable and it's timely. Obviously, with the end of the year and being able to implement it for next year, so I think it's very doable.
Were you surprised that the Senate tucked into its bill the elimination of the Obamacare mandate?
It is, and it's we're trying and doing everything we can. Obviously, the House has passed a version of repeal. The Senate hasn't been able to get there, so I think you're going to start seeing the Senate start picking away at a lot of those provisions and moving them forward in other pieces of legislation. If they are not able to get the whole thing through or done, then that's exactly what they're going to do. And so, any way they can get there, obviously it takes longer to do it that way. And I would like to see full repeal right out of the gate. But the Senate is a much different animal than the House. Much different, and obviously one senator can hold something up, or one, when the numbers are so close as they are in the Senate, it only takes one individual, and which we've seen that. But the more that they can do, or again, keep picking away at that, the better.
Our guest on this first hour of the hotline this morning is Congressman Sam Graves of North Missouri. If you've got questions or comments for the congressman, you know our numbers. Give us a call, 364-6868 from St. Joseph. 1-800-258-6868, toll-free from outside the city. We'll go to the phones here. Good morning. You're on the hotline with Congressman Sam Graves.
Good morning, Barry. Good morning, Congressman Graves.
Morning, Jim.
I live in Rockport, as everybody knows. I didn't know if Congressman Graves knew. And my daughter was having a health insurance issue, and she didn't know what to do, and she called your office. And I would like to thank you or the people in your office that straightened her out, and, man, they did a wonderful job. She was asking me questions I couldn't answer, and the people in your office answered every question she had, and she was very happy with the outcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We are having, in fact, we're getting a lot of calls right now from folks, and I don't know if this is necessarily related to that, but with Blue Cross and Blue Shield pulling out of the individual market in Missouri, which a lot of that's in North Missouri, it's just hammering folks throughout our area and making it harder and harder and more expensive. Folks, premiums are going through the roof and continuing to go through the roof. Which is another reason why we have got to eliminate Obamacare, and it's a problem. It's a serious problem, and it's not going to get any better either until we are able to change the system. But
okay.
I appreciate very much your comments.
Thank you.
No problem. Now, the main reason I called is there is a congressman that introduced a bill to do away with the tax credit for wind turbines.
I don't know. I haven't seen that, but that very much that's very much a possibility. Right now, the subsidy on wind turbines is higher than the entire cost of the same unit of electricity generated by coal, and I know there's a movement too just to eliminate subsidies on all energy and just let everything stand on its own, everything. But I don't know what this if there's a specific bill or not, which obviously there is if you're talking about it.
Yeah, it was Senator Lamar Alexander. He's proposing elimination of the subsidy for the wind energy tax credit 2 years early. Right now it's set to expire in 2 years. He wants to eliminate it right away.
Okay, and I can
check it out.
Yeah, obviously, and like I say, there's a movement to eliminate all subsidies on all energy, which I do support.
Okay, good. I was wondering how you stood on that. That's exactly what I was wanting to know. Okay, my feeling is let the business stand on its own. If it can't, too bad.
Yep, and that includes,
Yeah,
and that also includes everything. That includes, ethanol and biodiesel and solar, wind, coal, whatever, everything. Let it, like you say, let it stand on its own.
Well, I agree. That's what we need to do. Let the free market set the price. Don't let the government try to pick winners.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jim.
Y'all have a good Thanksgiving, and God bless you all.
Same to you, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Barry. Bye.
I'm glad he asked about that, and that's a good point about the possibility of eliminating all the subsidies, all energy subsidies, whatever they might be.
Yeah, and again, it's just like he said. It's picking winners and losers, and I just think they need to be eliminated. And again, when you're subsidizing one form of electricity over another to the tune of, again, the entire cost of that same unit, it creates a problem. It's obviously costing the taxpayers, and costing the taxpayers a lot. So.
Does politically, Sam or Congressman, does like ending the production tax credit for ethanol, is there a political cost to that for you?
Well, ethanol, and it expired some time ago, to be honest with you. But is there a political cost? And absolutely there could be. Obviously, ethanol is very important and a big part of the farm economy. But what we're seeing with ethanol is now it's the oil companies are grabbing onto it. They're doing everything they can to get their hands on it because it increases the octane level of their gas. It obviously makes their gas go farther. It's cleaner. And obviously with their oxygenate issues, which is an old issue. But regardless, we're selling ethanol right now and selling a lot. And and it's working. It's absolutely working. Some of the ethanol plants, though, interestingly enough, and you take like Craig, Missouri, up here, it's completely food production. None of that ethanol even goes into fuel anymore. It's all food grade alcohol, to whiskeys, bourbons, vodkas, you name it. And it's all, there's different distillations and different, process that everybody wants different, and they cater to that. And they make it work. And so, all of that grain going into the Craig plant is going to food-grade alcohol. So not all the ethanol plant, a lot of others are doing that as well. Just a big still in the hills of Holt County.
Okay, well, it's like you get your corn from a jar.
That's
or
right.
Something. Yeah. All right, Congressman Sam Graves is your guest. More in a moment. Good morning. You're on the hotline with Congressman Graves.
Good morning, Barry.
Morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Congressman.
Morning.
Congratulations on all your good jobs and everything. I appreciate that really quite a bit.
Thank you.
What do you think about the subsidies with the NFL?
Well, interestingly enough, one of the provisions in the tax bill eliminates the tax-free bond areas. Now, that's creating a problem, obviously, with municipalities that use those to do sewer systems and all. But what it was aimed at doing was preventing stadiums from being able to access tax-free bonds to, it was mainly targeted at the NFL. And I love that provision. I thought it was, smacking right back at the NFL and the issues that, obviously that we're seeing. And I think it's, and this is just my opinion, but I think it's deplorable what's being displayed by some players within the NFL, and which is the reason I've completely quit watching games. I turn to other sports that respect the flag and respect what people have done to protect that flag throughout our nation's history. And so I got a kick out of that provision when it was put in the tax bill, and it was a pushback right at the NFL.
Tell you what, you and me both. That was just like a slap in the face to me, and I kind of lost a little bit of a guilty pleasure of my own on Sundays, and I just didn't think it was right. So, okay, sounds good. I'll sit back and listen to the rest of the show.
Thank you.
Aaron, thanks for the call.
Bye.
Let's talk just a little bit more about current issues here. One of the things we're hearing a lot about, it's in the media, and that is the Roy Moore, Al Franken, John Conyers. I mean, this seems to be spreading. We're hearing more and more people are coming forward. Just What do you think about all of this?
Well, it's frustrating, to say the least, and you have a situation where, and those are obviously all different situations as well. You take Al Franken or Roy Moore. These things happened before. They were in the Senate, or in Roy Moore's case before he was running for the Senate. I think they're up to the voters. This is up to the voters of, for instance, in Roy Moore's case, Alabama. It's their decision. It's not our decision to make. And Al Franken, he's obviously going to have to stand for re-election, and it's up to the voters in Minnesota. I think it's Minnesota to make that decision. Conyers the same way, and I would venture to say Conyers is going to have a big problem. Now, that's something that happened while he's in Congress, and so I think that needs to be investigated. It needs to be looked into, and this probably isn't going to be the last case that comes up, and they need to be investigated by the Ethics Committee, which is going to happen. There's already been calls for that, and it's going to have to be looked into. You can't have a situation or in any workplace, whether it's corporate or business or Congress or whatever the case, where there's any sort of sexual harassment. That's just it's wrong. We all know it's wrong.
There was news that came out a couple of weeks ago, and it was something that I think most people had not known about, and I'm wondering how widely known it was in Congress, that there's a slush fund, basically, to buy the silence of people who had accusations of sexual harassment against members of Congress or the staffs of Congress people.
And that actually goes, and that's a subject that's going to be talked about and obviously going to be looked into, but it obviously goes both ways, too. Part of that is, the individuals bringing the allegations forward they don't want their name out there because they still want to remain employable or still want to continue. So, part of that, as I've looked into this, part of that, whatever you want to call it, gag order or silence order, is to keep them out of the media agreement as well. And then there's a lot of, you got to understand too, there's a lot of suits that are brought against, and I'll kind of explain this because I've done some looking into it, that are brought against the House of Representatives or the Senate, whatever the case may be. But you also have a cottage industry out there. You have attorneys that cold call, and they pay attention to who is moving from one office to the next or have been released from a job, and that's all information that you can get. And then they'll cold call and say, hey, would you, and this is classic and this is how it goes, would you be interested in filing a suit against the House of Representatives for wrongful discharge? I can guarantee you that it's going to be sealed and your name's never going to be out there, and I'll promise you I can get you a settlement of, and it's between $20,000 and $30,000. And they said the House of Representatives will always settle for that because they don't want the publicity and how this goes and everything else, and so I can promise you we'll get that. And they're making, in any one particular time, there's 4 or 5 attorneys in Washington, D.C. They may have 20 cases pending before, and a lot of them. And what's more, you don't have to pay unless it's settled. So they do this all the time. Now, that's not to say that there isn't something happening, and we'll find out with Conyers. We don't know if he did or didn't, but we're going to find out. And obviously, we all know, we don't have to pretend that there isn't this sort of thing that happens. It happens everywhere, and we need to, seek those out and take care of them. But we also have people that are preying on this and working through it and making a living doing it. Now, I've also found out, too, each one of those cases has to be approved by the administration committee, and it's a unanimous approval. So both Democrats and Republicans on there, take a look at these. And I also know they have denied, approval of settlements. So you've got different settlements. There may be everything from some people say they were released, from what I've asked, and you can't get specifics, but released for religious persecution or released for gender or released for, it may be, wrongfully discharged because they were homosexual or not, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of others out there, plus on top of that, obviously sexual harassment, which is illegal in and of itself, by the way. As is other discrimination. So some of these are purely legitimate claims. Some of them are nothing more than then let's file this, and we'll ask for this much, but we're going to settle for this. You pay after we get the settlement, and don't worry, your name will never be out there. They always want to seal it. We'll get it sealed. Your name's never going to be known. So it's a frustrating situation, and it's obviously going to be looked into.
Some of the news reports have indicated that over periods of years and years, millions of dollars have been paid out by this fund.
Mm-hmm. And that's disturbing in and of itself as well. And a lot of members don't even know that this is out there. And we also have to look into what the administration committee itself. What's the criteria for approving or not approving? What's the criteria for obviously moving forward on this or changing? Do we protect the identities of those individuals that have brought these cases forward? You obviously don't want somebody to not bring a legitimate case forward because they're scared of repercussions as a result. So you have to protect those individuals' identity, or you're never going to get to the bottom of these illegalities.
All right, we have more callers. We'll go to the phones here. Good morning. You're on the hotline with Congressman Sam Graves.
Yes, good morning. I appreciate the representative's stance on repealing the production tax credits for wind. They estimate by the Congressional Research Service that between 2016 and 2020, that'll save taxpayers $23 billion. So we appreciate that. The question I had for the representative, here locally, we've got three pending lawsuits, one in Clinton County, two in DeKalb County, from the wind energy giant NextEra. What happens to the small townships and county government with limited funds when their legal fees are down to zero?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you, or a good answer for you. And this is obviously it's a big problem. There's a lot of folks on both sides of this that are upset about it, and I know there's a lot of lawsuits, and I don't know how those are going to turn out. I don't know what's going to happen too. Like you say, when entities are down to zero when it comes to fighting that, and our counties don't have a lot of money out there, to be quite honest with you. Particularly third-class counties,
right?
To do a whole lot, but I don't have a good answer for you, to be quite honest with you. I'm just not sure. But the problem with the biggest problem with wind is we're looking too much at it as the answer to everything. And the unfortunate part is you're seeing now the wind is ending up in the Midwest. Wind energy is, but the problem with it, it's very inefficient. Obviously, you don't generate electricity unless the wind is blowing. And then you have to transfer that over long distances because a lot of states aren't allowing. You take, I got the biggest kick out of back when Ted Kennedy was pushing wind energy all the time. He didn't want it off the coast of Massachusetts. He was more than happy to place it right here in the Midwest and then transfer it. Well, the problem with the degradation of that electricity when you transfer it over long stretches of power lines is a real problem. And this whole thing is built on the subsidy itself, and again, it's an extremely inefficient way to generate electricity. It's part of the answer. Obviously, it supplements that from natural gas and from coal, but I think it needs to all be a part of the solution, and not looking to wind as the only answer.
Great, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the call. 364-6868, our number in St. Joseph, 1-800-258-6868, our number to call toll-free from outside the city. More of your calls for Congressman Graves just ahead.
And settlements we don't even know about have been sort of coming in on individual people in the government. If you settle enough of those over a long enough period of time, it will become a presumption that the Senate or the House has been maintaining a hostile workplace. And I think you'll see suits starting to come in from ex-employees or disgruntled employees who are there now, who are willing to sacrifice their career because they won't be welcome in Washington once they sue the Senate or the House. But I think there are attorneys out there that will take those cases, and in private industry, you can be in trouble for maintaining a hostile work environment. And I think those cases are going to start to come in. You have any feelings on that?
Well, it's obviously already a presumption out there because you have, again, there's a group of attorneys, and there's 3 that are very active in it, and then there's probably another half a dozen that take part in it. But they know, and that's when they cold call. You know, all of these young, and they'll tell them, look, and the fact of the matter is, most staff in D.C. are young. They're between the ages of 22 and 30, and you tell a 25-year-old, hey, I can get you $10,000 because I guarantee if you'll file this, I'll take care of it. You don't have to pay me unless we settle. We settle for $20,000. You take 10, I'll take 10. And that looks pretty good, and your name will never be known, and they're making, that's the way they're making a living. They
make a career. They're like ambulance chasers. But do they actually sue the House or the Senate, or do they sue the individual?
No, they actually sue the House. Is what they do, and then the individuals are named.
And another thing about Roy Moore, I've noticed in the last 2 days, I think President Trump has decided that it's in his best interest and in everybody's best interest to give a little support to Roy Moore. I notice he's lightening up a little bit, and I think we're a few days away from some lightweight support of Roy Moore by the president. That's what it looks like to me. What do you think about that?
And well, the bottom line is, and again, Judge Moore is denying this. We don't know if he did or didn't, but in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty.
That's right.
And the truth of the matter is, it's up to the people of the state of Alabama. It's not up to Mitch McConnell. It's not up to anybody else outside the state of Alabama. It's up to the people of the state of Alabama, and I think we need to leave that election alone and let the will of the people decide. I agree 100%.
And I think the people of Alabama, no matter how they feel about whether or not he did these things, I think the tendency is for them to forgive him after 40 years. They're a forgiving bunch of people. They live their religion in that part of the country, and good for them. I'm all with them on that, and I'm for Roy Moore, too.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. All right. Congressman Sam Graves is your guest here. We're going to take one more commercial break. Back with the Congressman just ahead. Congressman Sam Graves, your guest on this part of the hotline this morning. And we've covered a variety of issues here. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is getting something done on infrastructure. It's a high priority with the President and I think with many members of Congress.
Yeah, and that's going to follow right on the heels of the tax package. We'll do it next year. Unfortunately, the president wanted to see it done by the end of this year. We're just simply not going to be able to make that time frame, and given the backlog that we've got in the Senate right now. But we're going to jump into it. It's going to be a very broad, reaching infrastructure package to include everything, not just highways and bridges, which I will have, that component of. That'll be under my jurisdiction, but it's going to be water systems, sewer systems, broadband, all modes of transportation, aviation, rail, roads, bridges, inland waterways, locks and dams, just you name it. It's a very, very broad infrastructure package. The president wants to see $1 trillion worth of investment. We'll see $200 billion, placed in there for, in direct expenditures. And then how we get there through public-private partnerships and various things. We're obviously working on that right now, and working with the White House to try to figure out how to move that forward. But it's going to be an interesting bill and a fascinating process. But it's looking at all of this infrastructure that we're obviously using up and trying to rebuild that.
Is our highway infrastructure the most expensive thing to fix and the one that's in the biggest trouble, or are there others?
Well, there's others, but obviously highways is one of the. It's obviously one of the most expensive, and it's also one of the most important. We're a nation on the move, and that may be through aviation or through rail, but highways is the number. Sooner or later, no matter how everything in this country moves, goods, people, freight. Services, everything moves. Sooner or later, whether it's on rail or an airplane or whatever the case may be, or a barge, it's still got to get to its final destination, or to that railhead, for instance, by roads and trucks. And that's the most important component when it comes to our transportation system by far. And it's very tough to maintain. It's expensive to maintain. And what's more, we're seeing volumes of traffic that we never, in our wildest dreams back when we developed the interstate system and everything, we never imagined, the kind of volumes that we're seeing. But transportation is a good thing. It's pure, it's commerce. It's the movement of goods, services, and people, and vitally important. And and that'll be one of the big components when it comes to this bill.
Is self-driving vehicles a part of what you're going to be thinking about in transportation?
It is, but we're also looking at that, as standalone, and it's what they call automated vehicles, and then you've also got UAVs in the aviation sector, the same thing, and it's trying to figure out, what technology is out there, and as we continue to build roads or replace roads, whatever the case may be, we have to be thinking about that. We have to have uniform striping and signage now, and what's more, we have to think about what needs to be embedded in the road itself to be able to be accessed by automated vehicles and that sort of thing. Because when you cover up the lines painted on the highway during snow cover or whatever the case may be, then you got to develop something else. But this technology is moving rapidly, and it's fascinating to see. And what they call Stage 5, which is the ultimate, that's vehicles that have no steering wheel, no input whatsoever from the driver. Right now we're seeing that Stage 2, some Stage 3 type of stuff, but it's happening faster and faster and faster. Commercial sector we have to deal with, figure out because we want to be safe, but by the same token we don't want to hamper technology and the industry itself and what's happening, but we want to be safe. The same thing in the air. We want to be safe. So we're trying to get our arms around what we do to make sure that we don't have a patchwork of 50 different states with 50 different sets of regulations that have to be dealt with. It's going to have to be a uniform system, but we definitely want to be safe. And that's the hard part, is figuring out. And then you get into the whole insurance. If you've got an autonomous vehicle out there driving down the road and it has an accident, who's responsible? That's a really tough question. Who's responsible? The programmer? The GPS that it's following? The manufacturer of the car? You obviously don't have a driver. If you have a full autonomous vehicle, and trying to wrap our arms around that too is proven to be very troublesome.
Is Stage 5, do you think, inevitable at some point?
I think it'll happen. Now, what's interesting about this is it's easy to conceive, and all the testing is being done right now in urban environments. But you take, our rural county, you take my area up there, and obviously we're in the middle of harvest, but the roads are, when you go back in and patch them in or do whatever, sometimes the lines never get painted. In some cases, you think about dirt roads, gravel roads. In fact, half of rural Missouri is gravel roads. Well, how do autonomous vehicles deal with a gravel road? We're going to have to get a whole lot sharper when it comes to the GPS system and being able to do that. And we all know too, when you punch in the map and get directions, on your GPS on your phone or whatever the case may be, they turn you down a road that is either no longer a road or it doesn't go where it says it's going to go. So we're going to have to get a whole lot better about that. But there's still going to be, for all the fascinating technology that's out there, we're still going to have driver input for a long time, just simply because we have a lot of roads out there that these vehicles aren't going to be able to navigate it. And let's when you top a hill and there's a combine, a piece of farm machinery too, it's going to have to figure that one out too, and get off in the ditch so you can get by. And those are the things that worry me, is just the rural areas and how you deal with that. So we've still got a lot of problems to solve.
Got about 30 seconds left. Thoughts on Thanksgiving here as we head into that period?
Well, it's this time of year is one of my favorite, and we should all be thankful. We live in a wonderful, wonderful country, and one of the things we like to do in our family is talk about what we're thankful for. And I've got a new grandson, and I can't wait to every opportunity I get to hang out with him and play with him. He's now 9.5 months old, and he's the lights are coming on, and I just love playing with him, and I can't wait for the next one. So it's a good time to be with family.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Well, happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there. Thank you, Barry. One 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 out there.